Hello. So today we're going to talk about the keep on going signal or the stay in behavior marker. I'm going to use those two terms sort of interoperably. We're going to talk about that, and then we're going to explain how we can also use pressure to do the same thing. And this is going to dovetail into the lesson that we already had on pressure for activation, as in using pressure to compel to action motivationally, as well as using that same pressure to make the dog want to stop doing something or choose not to do something in the future. Well, there's a third sort of function of pressure that we can use, and that is to tell the dog to keep doing well what you're already doing, right? And we're going to work through the process of how to do that and what that looks like and why we might want to do that, right? So first thing we got to cover, what is it? Okay, so the keep on going signal, the stay in behavior signal. Most people's marker system, people who are using markers, especially the traditional sort of verbal marker system, have that built in, where their yes is the terminal bridge, where it means you're finished doing over there what I've asked you to do, come back to me and get some reinforcement. And their good is their keep on going signal or their stay in behavior signal, where they tell the dog, imagine who is in a down, and that's probably a behavior that we'll use quite a lot today in our explanations. The dog is in a down and they'll say good, and that means I'm going to come to you and I'm going to give you reinforcement in place. Okay, so that's what it is. Something that you might commonly see, or certainly that I experience, is people who have the clicker loaded as a stay in behavior signal. And I think that is a misuse of the power of a clicker. Now, we're going to talk about how, maybe a word that tells the dog to stay in behavior is not the best. But certainly I think that if you're going to have a word that tells the dog to stay in the behavior, or if you're within your marker system, that is not the place to put the clicker. Because the function of the clicker really, to me, is in its accuracy and capturing moments that, with timing and precision, that would be difficult to do with a verbal marker, as well as bringing on behaviors as a reflex response that would be too difficult to do with a verbal marker. The marker for staying in behavior has a lot of room for leeway, right? Because the dog is already doing it and you want him to continue doing it. So you don't need to be as precise in your timing. So it's not the highest or best use of the clicker. I think that the way people end up having done that is that when they go to load the clicker, they've got their food, the dog's sitting right in front of them or standing right in front of them or, doing whatever, he's right in front of them. And they click and they give him food, and they click and they give him food, and they click and they give him food. And they, in that moment, load it with the function of when you hear this clicker, food will come to you. So later, when they try to use the clicker, and maybe they're trying to shape with it or whatever, when they click, the dog doesn't do anything. He just continues doing well what he is doing right then, because he's expecting that food will come to him because that's how it was loaded, right? So I don't think that's the best way to use a clicker, but that is how you would load a keep on going signal or a stay in behavior signal if you were to use one. Dog is in a behavior, you say a word that means nothing to the dog, you give him food. Okay, so that's how you would load it. It does really almost always require the delivery of a reinforcer that the dog can take static, right? And for me, one of the reasons I'm not so hot on the stay in behavior signal, and I don't use very often, even when I did used to use the traditional good, is that it's difficult for a dog to take reinforcement of any kind and stay in a behavior, especially if it's a mobile behavior. Like if you're healing, if for my money, there isn't a dog that can heal as well as we want him to and be eating at the same time, all right? So telling him he's good and giving him food in that position is, to me, a little bit messy. Where I would use it is in static behaviors, right? So I can tell my dog, like, yeah, good, you're downing there well, and I'm happy with it, and I can come over and I can give him food, and he can down quite well while he eats food. But, what he can't do is down quite well and play tug with me, right? So the tug and the gameplay, that kind of thing, is really much better for your terminal markers, your terminal bridge, and then your reinforcer associated with that. And the food is very, very good if you're going to try and reward the dog in position. Why would you want to do that? Of course, rewarding the dog out of position will lead to some sort of instability in the behavior. So almost certainly the reason why you would at some point want to reinforce the dog inside of the behavior and keep him going within the behavior is to build stability in it, so that he's of the belief that you will come to him at some point and you will give him reinforcement, or it's possible you could release him from the behavior and he'll come to you. And if we put enough value into both sides of that equation, then he's likely to stay in that position until he hears the mark for either one. Okay, so using that mark in the learning phase, it really or the learning phase of the behavior, it really doesn't matter whether you give that mark or not, right? So most people will have the dog say in his down, and they will look and they say good, right? And they walk over and they give the dog food, and they're in that learning phase of reinforcement within that behavior. So the dog hears that word that means nothing, food comes to him, and he knows, okay, I got that food for staying in behavior. That's great in the learning phase. It wouldn't matter whether you gave that mark or not, I don't think, as the dog is learning that, right? So you could just walk over and go, here's food, or you could walk over and say, good, here's food, right? The reason that you would want to use that mark is because you can then, when you get to an intermittent phase of reinforcement, at distance, say to the dog, good, and he feels as though he got food, right? And he's happy, he knows he's on the right track, he knows he's in the right behavior, but you don't necessarily have to go over there and give him the food all of the time, okay? So then that brings us to that utility and usability. When can I actually do that, right? So if you don't compete with your dog and it's just a normal pet dog and you're never going to be assessed and critiqued on how many commands you give, no big deal, right? You can say that as many times as you want, and you can say to the dog while he's doing what he's happily doing well, you can say good, and he'll carry on doing it and he'll feel reinforced. And every now and again, with a trained dog or a dog that knows the behavior and knows the relationship to the marker, you can easily walk over and deliver some food in place, and he'll recharge that mark. The battery system, which we've talked about before, you recharge that mark every now and again, and he knows, okay, cool, I stay in behavior, and I reinforcement will come to me. Okay, so there's no issue in doing that. Then one of the reasons I don't use it, and this is what we're going to sort of go on with, is because I can't give that in competition, right? I can't say to my dog good, because that would count as an extra command, right? So instead, I take the opportunity when I am giving reinforcement in position to build stability to further load the command that would bring on that behavior. Now, if you watch the naming a behavior lesson, it will be clear in that our every command took the value of a marker at some point, right? And so we can continue to charge that command as a marker for reinforcement conditional on the work. So when my dog is in a down, instead of saying to him good and giving him food in position, I'll tell him to do what he's already doing. I'll say the command down and give him that food, right? Now, the only reason that that's more effective than saying good is because I further charge my command. That's all. But it's not really more effective at keeping the dog in the position. It maybe is more effective at showing the dog a little bit more value for the word and going into the position, right? No biggie. That's not where the real value, where the real power comes from. The next is this counterintuitive part, and we say staying motivated and its counterintuitive nature. Okay, so imagine your dog is in his down, and you can read from his body language, or you see some kind of other motivation or distraction that your dog is likely interested in. You think he's going to break position. The reason any dog would break the position, especially that down, right? Why does a dog do anything? It's to better his own situation. If he's going to break the position, it's because he's going to break the position in order to go and seek reinforcement somewhere else, right? So if you can read from your dog's body or the environment that you think is going to break position, the right thing to do in that moment, if your keep on going, stay in position signal is good, is to say good to your dog. But no one ever does that. You'd be hard pressed to cognitively convince yourself to do that, as well as convince anybody else to do it, right? as you see your dog about to break position, he is thinking, no reinforcement is going to come to me. Now, there could be lots of reasons why he's going to break the position, but the real reason why he's going to do it is because at the core, when you break it down to deep enough section, is because he doesn't find that as reinforcing as something else that he wants to go and receive reinforcement from. So as you can see your dog hovering about to break position, especially if that were to come towards you, which is largely what most dogs do when they're going to break the position, they come in search of the handler. The right thing to do would be to say to the dog, good, which no one is ever going to do because something good is not happening. But if you said that, the dog would go, okay, that's the command, that's the signal to stay in behavior, reinforcement will come to me. But no one's ever going to do that. Instead, what they tend to do is something else. They give their non-reinforcing marker, and the non-reinforcing marker looks something like or no. So when you can see the dog about to break from the behavior, what is intuitive, what feels like the right thing to do is to tell the dog, if you do that, no reinforcement will come, right? And that's true that we have to then, we control the dog or we control the reinforcers. We find a way to tell the dog that's the wrong thing. Don't break the position. And the dog learns the reinforcer that I was about to go after is now off the table, right? And this is a much easier thing to convince people to do, if their command is down and the dog is in down and their keep on going signal for the down is down, when the dog appears to be breaking position, they can re-give the command and tell the dog down. And the dog then, that's intuitive for the person. That feels like something that would be easy to say in that moment. Like you can see yourself watching your dog about to break position and then telling him to get back into the position. You totally could see that happening. Then in that moment, the dog hears down and he goes, oh, that's right. That is a word that means reinforcement can come to me if I stay in this position. So what we're actually doing is staying on the more motivational side of the equation, because saying to the dog, don't break the down, right? That could work, for sure it could. But in his mind, what you did was told him, you will not get reinforcement for breaking the position, right? So therefore the fallout is that he hopefully stays in the position, right? Now, if he looks like he's about to break position and you say down again, further reinforcing the command, what happens in his mind is he goes, oh, that's right, reinforcement will come to me, I will stay here. Now, the action is likely the same. We probably end up with a dog that stays there. But one way is telling him, hey, you're not going to get what you think you're going to get. And the other way is telling him, don't worry, good things are going to come to you, right? So it seems like almost the same kind of thing, but the change in the dog's understanding of what we're saying is actually quite different, okay? So that's why I stick with the command of the behavior as the keep on going signal to stay in that behavior. And I really, truly only use that with static behaviors. Sit, down, stand, those kinds of things, right? I can tell the dog at distance, continue doing that, right? And he can do it and receive reinforcement while he does it. That's my criteria of whether I would ever use that in that command, in that behavior, that command for that behavior. Okay, but really, that's probably stuff that you might have heard before. The real interesting stuff we're going to talk about now is including pressure as the keep on going signal. Keep doing what you're already doing, all right? Now, if you're at that point, whether you're using good or you're using the command that I've just spoken about, it doesn't matter at this point. What you can do is give a new signal with no function 1 second before an old signal with a strong function, right? So if you're on the very low levels of your e-collar, this is where you can give the functions, that feeling from the e-collar a function. And while your dog is in a down, you could stim for no reason. You could say the command down, right? Or good if that's what you're using, if I have not adequately convinced you, right? You give the stim, you wait 1 second, you give the command, you give food in place. Before too long, classical conditioning kicks in, you no longer have to give the command. And what you have done is given the stim the function of while I am in the behavior, that stim acts as a reinforcer to continue doing the behavior. And now you have something that's a lot more portable and a lot more usable at distance. Imagine you see your dog beginning to break from the position, exactly like we said that he could because of many, many reasons. Maybe he's coming to you to get reinforcement. Maybe he is, motivated elsewhere to go get reinforcement somewhere else. Or you just want to give a reinforcer for whatever reason. You can stim and give a silent marker or signal for stay in the behavior. At that time, stimming the dog would say to him, keep going, keep staying in that position. So we have the idea of using pressure for activation and abstinence. We can say to the dog, a stim that accompanies a command is a call to action for that command. It is a reinforcer of that command. But if you are already under command and you feel a stim, that stim acts as a reinforcer of the command under which you are already under, right? By loading it in that fashion, it means that we can, at distance, say to our dog, keep doing what you're doing well, reinforcement will come to you, and we can do that with the e-collar. We could do that at any moment. We could just give the dog that feedback. Or if we see the dog beginning to hover in position, like he's going to break position, that stim can be feedback to him that he must stay in that position, right? That is a command to stay in that position. And the beauty of the e-collar, of course, is that we can lower and raise the volume to suit the situation. Of course, if I give the dog a larger stim, like when we get out of the extreme low level stim and we go into a level where the dog would, feel and potentially find aversive, we make sure that he doesn't find aversive by giving him a very high value reinforcer. And our ratios must always remain the same. If we give a higher level in the stim, we must give a much higher level positive reinforcement that comes into the behavior if we're using the stim as a keep on going signal. That's important, right? Because now when my dog sees something that is very high value to him and he considers breaking his static position in order to go and reinforce himself over there, with a very high stim, I'm not using it for saying, don't go do that, right? That's not the function of the stim. It's not for abstinence in that moment. It's not saying to the dog, don't go to that because you'll be stimmed. He already was stimmed. What I am telling him is if he is considering breaking the position, it's because he thinks the reinforcer that can come for doing this behavior is lower value than what I see over there. But if my ratios in my learning phase are always correct, if my stim is always of a lower value than the positive reinforcement that comes afterwards in the learning phase, if when I give him a much higher level stim later, that a stim that announces to him the possibility of the reinforcer that he could earn. So when he sees his competing motivator over there and he thinks, I'm going to go over to that because that's worth more to me than what I could be paid for doing this behavior, I can in that moment give him a higher level stim and say, now I have told you at distance silently what this behavior is potentially worth, right? If you got a stim higher than what you're expecting, that means that the reinforcer that will come to you is higher than what you were expecting. And if I know my dog reasonably well, I can tell him that I'll outpay him. I'll outpay the competing motivator over there, right? Like, stick with me. I've got the good stuff. Stay in the position, right? And it means that we can bring a profound amount of stability using the stim at distance, right? The last thing I have on here is protection against errors. Now, something that I always think is important we concede with e-collars is that, it's a mechanical device that then, buttons and so forth, and then an electronic device that sends a signal. There's the capacity for errors. Like any tool, there's the capacity for errors. You might hit the wrong button and hit the boost, and maybe the dog receives a stim at a higher level. It could be in your pocket and he receives a stim at a higher level. And I've certainly seen that happen to people. And if you've not prepared your dog in this way, you can make doing that behavior aversive. So imagine your dog was never prepared for any of this. He's in a down and he feels a stim. Potentially, he could link that, like a high level stim that is uncomfortable or aversive. He could link that stim to the behavior of downing and therefore find downing aversive or choose never to down again. If this has been loaded and by accident your dog feels a high level stim, all we've done is potentially shown him that there can be a lot of value for holding the down. And if you're there and you're able to confirm that and overpay after the accidental high stim, then you keep that in check and you protect yourself for it happening further in the future. And if it happens later with a dog, like a more highly trained dog or a dog that's further into the system, at that point he can just be on a variable schedule of reinforcement. And so you don't always have to follow up with that high level stim. He'll just go like, oh, okay, variable schedule, I didn't get it, but it could have potentially come. Okay, so that's it. It's a shorter lesson, but I think it's a valuable one. It's very easy. It's a very easy thing to do. There's nothing difficult about it. It's just a counterintuitive topic. So, loading, you say the word, pay the dog in position. Do you need to say the word if you always intend to pay the dog? There's absolutely no there's no reason to say a word, load a keep on going signal, if you never intend to say it at distance without paying. If you intend to walk over and pay the dog in position every time, then there's no value in having the word, right? If you want to be able to say it to the dog at distance and tell him he's doing the right thing and not have to walk over there and give him food, then that's the value of the marker. That's why having the marker is good. But keep in mind that marker should be the thing you say if you think it's possible your dog will break, because he is breaking because he's not convinced that that behavior can be adequately reinforced versus the other thing he wants to do. And you saying in that moment, good, as your dog is about to break, is unlikely to happen. There aren't too many people that are likely to make that cognitive step in their brain. What you are likely to do is tell the dog to do the behavior again. And if you've loaded that as the command happening inside the behavior that is already for that command, meaning the potential to come and bring reinforcement, your dog's more likely to hold the position. And you just stay more motivational. Instead of telling the dog, don't break, because you will not get the thing you think you're going to get, instead you're telling the dog, stay there, you will get good stuff. Good stuff will come to you. So we stay way more motivational. The dog's doing it for the search of a good thing rather than the avoidance of a bad thing, right? Then layer in front of that stim to mean pressure can come on. Layer in front of that the stim means that you'll hear the mark, which means you'll be fed in place. Before too long, we don't need the mark. And the stim can be a stay in behavior, keep on going signal that the dog understands. And in that way, we can use our stim for activation. If it is a stim that accompanies the command, it means activation, do what you've just been told. And if it is a stim that happens within a behavior, after a command that has been successfully followed, it is a keep on going signal and the potential of a reinforcer, right? Keep your ratios in check all the time. Your stim value must be less than the positive reinforcement, the value that you get. You'll never dip your dog into demotivation. That's it. Good luck.